Back to the Dean Obeidallah show. Right now, very happy to welcome for the first time Connecticut Attorney General William Tong. He's the first Asian American to hold statewide office in Connecticut. Before AG, served 12 years in the state as a state representative. He's a child of immigrants and is one of the AGs who filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump's efforts to rewrite the 14th Amendment to end what people call birthright citizenship. AG Tong, it's nice to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I should clarify, I was the first Asian American elected to any state office in Connecticut's history.
Oh, I thought it was state. I saw in the bios it's statewide,
Yeah,
but any.
but I say that only because isn't that hard to believe that in 2000 it took till 2006 for that to happen?
There's a
So
lot of firsts where you scratch your head and you go, how could that happen? How could you've only had the first black member of Congress from Connecticut and it happened in the modern era?
yeah, too
Or
many
the
firsts.
right,
Too
there's
many.
but it's good though. Like
Yeah.
we have these firsts, and I was the first Muslim American hosting a national show on SiriusXM. That was like 7, 8 years
Wonderful.
ago. So we all move forward, and I prevent any other from Muslims from getting hired. That's my entire job.
Has there been a second or a third?
I've done my best to keep them out. No, there, yes, there are. My
You've
friends on
cornered the market.
I'm like, this is it. I'm taking the ladder with me. My friend Kasim Rashid hosts the weekend show, and others have as well. And I've had countless guests on. I mean, it's sort of
Right.
my sense of trying to be inclusive as much as possible. I wanted to talk about inclusivity, that we're both the children who are, my citizenship is birthright. My dad is a Palestinian refugee, came to this country, and I
Yes.
was born here, so I became a citizen. My mom was born here, but she got her citizenship from birthright citizenship. I just want to get your reaction as someone, and I know your personal story is very compelling, what it means to you.
Yeah, I mean, my life isn't possible if I'm not a citizen at birth. My parents were both immigrants. My dad actually was nearly deported before I was born. He came here
Wow.
on a visitor visa, not an uncommon story. And he was told by INS, as it was called back then, Immigration and Naturalization Service, that his visa was going to expire and he needed to leave. And he wrote a 6-page handwritten letter to the President of the United States. And that guy was Richard Nixon.
Wow.
And that same INS agent came back shortly before my parents were going to leave the country and said, the president received your letter. And we welcome you to this country, but you have to go to the back of the line. So my dad had to wait a number of years before he became a citizen. But that was under a rational, compassionate, sane, functional immigration system under a Republican president,
Mhm.
right? Who obviously was the subject of some controversy and is complicated in history, but not complicated for my family. He saved us.
It's remarkable. What a remarkable story that you've the
Yeah,
death
but
of a 6 page handle and it gets to the president.
I tell that story. Yeah, he wrote this letter and he put a stamp on it and put it in the mail. I mean, the younger people listening today they don't even know what that means. And by the way, I forgot an important detail. How did the INS agent know about my dad and his tourist visa? Well, my folks to this day think a rival Chinese restaurant owner dropped a dime on him,
Wow.
literally. And like people today don't even know what dropping a dime means, but they
Right.
literally dropped a dime on my dad. It's remarkable and yet unremarkable in that so many people share some version of this story, right? I mean, who in their family doesn't have a complicated story, origin story, immigration story? And and my life is only possible, that only happens here
Yeah.
in this country. And if my parents didn't know that at my birth that I was a citizen, not just by right of my birth, but because of the 14th Amendment, you know, they wouldn't have had the ability, the freedom to invest everything in me as an American,
Mhm.
right? Buy a house, sign a lease, open a restaurant, run a business, focus on my education, give me every opportunity so that in one generation, I could go from my parents' Chinese restaurant kitchen to being on this show with you as the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut.
That's remarkable. And only in America, because my dad, a Palestinian refugee, meet a Sicilian American woman who her first language was Italian, born here from her parents were from Sicily at a party in North Jersey. and they met. And then my dad was a cook, and he started his own diner in Route 17 in New Jersey by Giant Stadium for years and years. So it's a similar path. But again, these are unique stories, and the lore of America, with all the faults in this country and all the work we still need to do to make it what we want it to be. My fiance is an immigrant from the Middle East. There are so many people who want to come here, and I know sometimes it's oversold, but there are opportunities here that you cannot get in other countries at all, still to this very day. And it's important
Uh,
that we keep that spirit alive.
I don't think it's oversold at all. I think this is happening. This is happening in public schools, and in communities and immigrant communities right now across this country. And come hell or high water, no matter, what happens, as long as our institutions hold, a lot of those kids will have the same opportunities that we've had. I believe that. That's what gives me hope. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah,
Honestly, given all the bad news that we have to consume every single day, what gives me hope? What gives me hope is this conversation, and that it happens. What gets me down is fast forward you and me to being born, today, and
yeah.
and given our, where we come from and who our people are, right? Where would I be today? If he's successful in blocking birthright citizenship, which I do not believe he will be, because we've sued and I think we're right,
Mhm.
and I think it's clear under the 14th Amendment, what status would I have? Eh,
No,
What would my parents do? Would we run? Would we, I'd effectively be stateless,
mhm.
possibly. I mean, it's absurd.
It happens in other countries when we visit other countries in on vacation. You learn about that. And getting to the executive order. So you're one of the AGs that filed a lawsuit. We covered on my show the judge in Seattle who ruled this is blatantly unconstitutional order. It's on hold for 2 weeks over there. What's going on with your lawsuit? Is it still pending?
Yes. So ours, they're parallel,
Mhm.
two groups of AGs working closely together. And so, as I'm sure you know from my friend Keith Ellison, we are in constant communication. Keith and I are always texting. And so our teams are highly coordinated. We've been ready for all of these fights for some time. That doesn't mean that you can be ready, for example, for the unprecedented, hijacking of, the spending clause in Congress's power of the purse, as the president has tried to effect in the last
Yep.
few days. You can't really prepare for something so big and so awful, but we are ready for birthright, and our case is being argued in Massachusetts federal court on February 7th.
Okay. And we'll follow that and we'll see what happens because
I
it's
may
gonna
be there for that one, so maybe we'll
that
call in from
please
the
yeah, that's
courtroom.
great. Is Keith gonna be now? Keith's probably some circuit out his
He, I
area.
think, I think Minnesota is part of our coalition,
Okay.
so I think
That's
he's
great.
part of the Massachusetts case.
That's great. And I'm chatting with Connecticut Attorney General William Tong. So, when you talk to people or interact with people in the immigrant community right now, are they aware of what Trump is trying to do? And if they are, what are you hearing from them?
Yeah, they're really scared, and it's already having an impact.
Hmm.
Uh, and what I've said, and I won't use the profanity, but I've said that this thing, insert profanity here, this thing is going to get real when your fifth grader comes home and says, "My best friend's parents have been detained and they're gone, and we don't know where they are."
Right.
Or worse, your fifth grader comes home and says, "My best friend is gone, and I don't know where they are." And already in my community, in my own life, my son is active in sports and a bunch of different social and community engagements, and already they're wondering about this kid or that kid and how come that kid's not showing up anymore.
Wow.
And I what I'm seeing is parents. What I say to people is there are a lot of know your rights documents, and people ask me, what are my rights and what can I do? And what I always start with is everybody needs to make their own decision for themselves and their family as to how much risk they are willing to tolerate,
Hmm.
and what's the best arrangement course of action for them, because it's different for everybody.
Absolutely. Uh, what about Donald Trump's just war on diversity? and
Yeah.
demonizing diversity,
Yeah.
and to the point of everybody's administration, we're going to end diversity. But there's something deeper there. And the message in a way is that if you're not a white male who looks like a white guy, who's straight, who's Christian, that somehow, if you have your job, you could have only obtained it through some quirk because some program that gave you
Yeah.
this job. And I wonder how that, you said you have a son, like how that affects younger people. If they hear it, if they're conscious of this yet, where is it leading to bigotry or remarks to people who are minorities, that are clearly minorities, about anything they got or their parents got? Because that's what I'm really concerned about, the children.
So it's hateful and racist and awful, right? And all of that. And look at my social media feed. Obviously, there's been an uptick in people, you know, questioning my loyalty, calling me an agent of the Chinese Communist Party, all of those things. And
Hmm.
what I say to them is, I'm an American, Jack.
Yeah.
I was born in Hartford Hospital, and I remember when Amara Walker, who's a CNN correspondent, who's Korean American, um, she was attacked in New Orleans International Airport. People were saying racist things to her with her film crew, and she got on Twitter later that day and explained how she felt. And what she said was, "I'm as American as Korean barbecue." And I thought that was such a beautiful
That's right.
construction. Like, I'm as American as pork fried rice, guys. Like, and so an attack on diversity, an attack on our greatest strength as a nation, which is what Ronald Reagan called it,
Hmm.
okay, is an attack on the American people. It's a war on the American people. And I'll tell you how that war manifests itself. My son is 13, and during COVID, I think it's fair to say my son. Uh, my wife is white. She's from Western Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Hotchkiss Tong, love her. Um, Grateful, and a great mom. But our son looks more like her than like me. My girls sort of favor me, but my son,
Right.
seems more white in his appearance. And the kids in his class who don't know any better were parroting what they were hearing on TV and maybe from their parents, that Chinese people eat bats, and because they eat bats, they caused COVID. And my son, had to try to stick up for himself and explain, first of all, I'm Chinese American, even if I may not look it, because welcome to America,
Right.
today in the 2020s. Um, and I have a mixed heritage, and that's hateful and offensive. But I mean, that's where it shows up. And then, of course, um, among adults, it shows up in much worse places and much worse ways, and to the point where people are hurting each other. And
Now, and I can relate to what your son's gone through because I don't present as Arab to people. I mean, I'm half Italian, half Arab. It's the melting pot of America.
right,
But in the years after 9/11 and at spikes of when Donald Trump was running in 2016, I heard a lot of stuff about Arabs said to my face and Muslims because people didn't know. They thought I was on their team, like team hate. I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm not on your team. I'm on Team America. And to me, bigotry and hate are anti-American. And that's where they fly in
yeah,
the face of the values of this nation. And I'm so defensive and protective of it because my dad came here and this country welcomed him. And my grandparents came from Sicily and this country welcomed them. And because I'm not saying America was perfect then, but they welcomed them. And I think we have to continue with that tradition and continue fighting against bigotry so people feel welcomed here. That's what this nation was designed to be. It's not England, it's not France, it's not hundreds of years. We're a relatively new country and it's founded by immigrants. Um, and we have to continue with this
who
process. I mean,
power who power this country and this economy. As I've said many times, Dean, since this whole thing started, America runs on two things: Dunkin and immigrant workers, you
right,
know. And
right,
frankly, look, I can take it. I get to be attorney general and I'm very well looked after. But and so it's okay if people attack me and call me names, but come down and tell me I'm a DEI hire. I'll tell you let me tell you what it took to get here.
right.
My parents came here with nothing and they worked themselves sick. literally. My dad had a heart attack before he was 40. My mom
Wow.
carried 5 of us to term on her feet until we dropped, right? That's what immigrants do. I
Hmm.
ran a Chinese restaurant. I barely saw my parents. I was raised mostly by my grandmother because they worked
Hmm.
every single day. And you know when I saw my parents, when I really started to see my parents was when I was working side by side with them in that Chinese restaurant.
Wow.
I walk into a takeout joint anywhere in America and I see, a couple kids doing their homework. They'll ring up your takeout. They're clearly not of age to work in the restaurant. That was me in my life. That's what immigrants do.
Sure.
And we have had to fight for every inch. And I've been very fortunate. I had a journalist ask me recently. He said, William, your story is great, and you're good at telling it. Um, but he said, there's sort of a question I have, which is you went to some pretty fancy schools, and how'd that happen? How did you make it to boarding school and college and law school? And I said to him, do you know how many egg rolls we had to sell to pay that tuition?
Wow. Yeah.
That's the truth.
I certainly understand.
Yeah.
And I can relate too. My parents had a diner. It was a 24-hour diner on Route 17 in New Jersey. And through high school and everything, I was there because that's when they bought it. And I was there summers and nights, and they were there all the time. You phone
I
call
put
2
a
in the morning.
blindfold on you. I bet you could do most of those jobs in that diner,
Sure. You
you
had to do
know?
everything. I was the son
Yeah.
of the owner. I had to do
And
everything.
flip pancakes and
Sure, I did everything.
cook some
Bus
corned beef
tables,
hash.
you name it, night manager one summer, and they paid for me to go to college and law school. And I was the first person in my family to get a college degree because of their sacrifice. And that's the immigrant experience in America that people don't get. It's what you're saying. It's hustle all the time. And that same work ethic stays with me today. I work nonstop. It's insane. I
Yes.
should stop sometime. But my dad had 3 jobs. It's what we do. It's in our DNA. So, you mentioned DI. A short time ago, Donald Trump had a press conference about the horrific tragedy of the airplane accident, which, on some level, you would have thought for a second he could be a human being. And he started by reading a speech, which I knew he didn't write because he used words like compassion, stuff like that. And then Trump appeared and he instantly blamed Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, Obama, and then he really leaned into DEI over and over, reading articles. You see the DEI programs, and that's what happened here. And he used the terms too white twice, and Obama's policies said they didn't want the place to be too white. So he's saying he wants to go back to that. Clearly, that's what he's saying here. But this idea of anyone who is diverse is a weakness um, is despicable. But this is where we are. He's taken it to a new level. So, what's your reaction when you hear Trump blames a horrific airplane accident with no evidence, no proof? We don't even know the identity of the air traffic controllers or the military people, their race or anything. Reporters ask him, he goes, well, it's just a common sense reaction I have.
I think there's a husband who's been interviewed, the coverage I've seen on like CNN.com or something. And the husband who talked about the last text he got from his wife, I think, if I remember correctly, is either a Hispanic American or a Muslim American or somebody from a background that looks like ours.
Hmm.
And to attack that is to attack that husband and his wife, who we can only assume is gone because they're the American people. This is who
Right.
we are, and it's so hateful and so corrosive, and is meant not just to boost his popularity or to get eyeballs on social media, but to divide us and to turn the American people on each other.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not going to bring anybody back from that plane crash. That's not going to make us any safer. Um, and that's why this presidency, frankly, and the way they're approaching the big problems that we face as a country, this is a small, big problem, obviously, this plane crash. The way they're approaching it isn't going to keep anybody safe. It's going to make us less safe. It's going to make us distrust each other and hate each other. Think about air traffic control now.
Yeah.
Think about the room, a boiler room. I mean, I don't know. I assume it's like you see in the movies, right? I've never been
Right. Sure.
in one, but they're all in close quarters, they got to make quick decisions and snap judgments to save people's lives and keep people safe. And then you have a military Black Hawk, U.S. Army helicopter, right, that's inserted into the mix. And something obviously happened, right? It's not clear what happened. But now you inject total distrust of each other. Why are you here? Who's this person? Are they qualified? They don't look like me. You know, how can you run an air traffic control tower that way? You can't.
How can you run any organization like that? Exactly.
And here's the thing about DEI, and I'm having some conversations with, leaders at, America's big corporations, because they're starting to pull back, and I'm starting to say, hold on a second.
Right.
And the message I'm delivering is, do you think that the fact of diversity, equity, inclusion is somehow reversible or is going to change? Like, are we going to suddenly stop hiring women? No. Right? It is New York City, or frankly, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Houston, Texas, suddenly going to start getting less diverse demographically? No.
Right.
Or Dearborn, Michigan.
Right.
So, that dam has broken. And so that's why it is such, as I said before, a war on the American people, because this is who we are. And we can't change that fundamental character.
I agree. And last thing, how are you and the other AGs? We already saw you jump into action twice. Once with the birthright citizenship executive order, the second on the federal funding freeze that he wanted to do. How do you prepare? Like, you guys have a team? Is it rapid response? All the AGs, like, where, it's like the Avengers, let's go, Ellison and Tish James, you all come together here?
Yeah, all of those things, but it's not haphazard, and it's not reactive. We are prepared. Somebody said to me at a rally right after Trump was reelected, William, I hope you're ready for the front line. And I said, I've been on the front line. We were here in 2019, 2020. This is much worse, but we're highly coordinated and prepared, and our teams are prepared. And, let me also underscore, this is in our official capacity. This is not political work. This is not partisan work. We're doing this to protect our states. The reason why Trump tripped over himself and backtracked to rescind the memo and say we didn't mean it is because he got calls from Republican governors and Republican attorneys general saying, what are you doing? We need that money.
That's a great point. And it did affect everyone. And Democrats were in one voice, the Democrats in the Senate and the House, talking about the impact on the red states and the rural areas. And I think it woke some people up. Well, the fight's going to continue. We're going to have a lot more battles against Donald Trump between now and the next few years that he's there. We'll see how long this lasts. But AG Tong, thank you so much for being on. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future. I'd love you to come back on as other things come up as we continue through this.
Thank you, Dean.
Challenging times.
Please reach out.
Sure. Take care. Have a